Good morning, students. So class 10th, today we're going to start off with a new chapter, that is footprints without feet. And this chapter here, it is, kind of a very short version of the novel Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. And in this story, as we have just discussed here, it is a science fiction and it is about having extraordinary powers. And if you are there blessed with any extraordinary power, how are you going to use it? And of course, as we have discussed already, when we are blessed with certain powers, it is within us, it is up to us to decide whether we're going to use it in the right direction, or sometimes when we become very powerful or we have a power that nobody else has, we might want to use it in a bad way. Now, this is what happens in this story. The story is about a scientist, Griffin, a very intelligent person. And he's worked very hard. He had a great interest in optics. He worked very hard and he developed the formula of invisibility, right? And now he's tried these medicines or those drugs on himself. And now what has happened, he has also become invisible. Before that, he had tried it on a cat also, on a piece of wool. And because he's a scientist, he's always locked inside and is just doing his experiments. And he's afraid that somebody might come and take away his material or his theory, his experiments. So he does not mix out much. And his landlord is slightly suspicious about his behavior. So now what has Griffin done? He has found this power of invisibility, this formula of invisibility, and he has made himself invisible, right? So he is there as, transparent as glass. Can't just see him. But what he had not foreseen was that he would still feel hungry. He would feel cold. He would have the other, requirements like a normal human body does. And he has, done this experiments in the winter months. And the only way he can remain invisible is when he removes his clothes, when he wears the clothes back again. So, of course, he gets a form back, right? Although he might not be visible, but that shape is there back, right? So what has he decided? Yes, so he's left the home where he lived, he's burnt that house, and he is now gone into, that lawlessness way, right? So he's broken laws and he's creating problems for others. What did he do? He went into a shop, he, hid himself over there, and he, of course, what did he do? He found food to eat, and he stayed there throughout the night. He even found himself clothes to wear to keep himself warm. But he kept on sleeping, and in the morning when the shop opened, he was found by the people who came to work over there. So he just ran away and removing his clothes one by one. Then he goes to another shop, a costume shop, and he tries to cover himself. But in the process, what does he do? He hits the old man there, the owner of the shop. So now he has committed a number of crimes there, right? So he just wants to run away from this place. He goes to a small village, I think. Now, how does the curiosity of the people arouse, or how does he become aware of this problem? He thinks he is invisible. It's raining, and there is this mud on the street. It's extremely cold. He's also feeling very cold. He has made himself invisible, and as he's walking, there are his footprints in the mud. And a couple of boys are there following him, and they're very surprised. They can see the footprints, but they can't see the person, right? So now let's see what this story leads on to. It gives us a very important message that if we are blessed with powers, if we are blessed with extraordinary qualities, we should know how to use them in the right way. Obviously, we are expected here, but it takes a very sensible person, it takes a very courageous person to go on the right path when he or she is blessed with extraordinary powers. Now, this is what happens with Griffin, and he goes on the wrong path. And once a criminal, he's there, started committing these petty crimes, and now he's gone on the path of lawlessness. So let's read the chapter. Let's start. Let's see what more Griffin does. Can a man become invisible? This is the story of a scientist who discovers how to make himself invisible. Does he use or misuse his discovery? The two boys stared in surprise at the fresh, muddy imprints. Imprints, the impressions of a pair of bare feet. What was a barefooted man doing on the steps of a house in the middle of London? And where was the man? So now the two boys were there behind Griffin. They're very surprised to see fresh footprints. And they're very surprised they're here in the middle of London. Who is this man in this cold weather who's walking barefoot? And now where the footprints are visible, where is the man? That man has become invisible. That man is the scientist, Griffin. As they gazed, a remarkable sight met their eyes. As they gazed, as they were looking at that footprint, what did they see? A fresh footmark appeared from nowhere. They couldn't see where it was coming from. And all of a sudden, right there in front of them, they saw another pair of footprints. Further footprints followed, one after another, descending the steps and progressing down the street. Descending, going down the steps, progressing, going towards or further across the street. The boys followed, fascinated, until the muddy impressions became fainter and fainter, and at last disappeared altogether. The boys, they followed these footprints and they saw the steps going down the stairs. They're very fascinated. Wow, we can see the footprints, but we can't see the man. Where is the man? And they're just following the footprints until the muddy impressions became fainter and fainter and at least disappeared altogether. Until the footprints were not visible, these boys, they followed. The explanation of the mystery was really simple enough. The bewildered boys, the surprised boys, had been following a scientist who had just discovered how to make the human body transparent. So the explanation was very simple. The feet there belonged to a scientist who had discovered the formula to make the human body transparent, right? Invisible. They were following an invisible man, but they did not know. They're very surprised that, see, we can see the footprints, but we can't see the man. Griffin, the scientist, had carried out experiment after experiment to prove that the human body could become invisible. Finally, he swallowed certain rare drugs and his body became as transparent as a sheet of glass, though it also remained as solid as glass. See what has happened now. Griffin conducted a number of experiments. There, and he wanted to make the human body invisible. So after a lot of experiments, he took a few rare drugs, right? He experimented on himself, and his body became as transparent as a sheet of glass. And it is as transparent as glass. You could just see through it. But it was also as solid as glass. He still has a form, right? Although he's not visible, his body is still retaining the shape. Okay? So he has made himself invisible. So who was Griffin? Griffin was a scientist. What has he done? He has made himself invisible. And why were the boys so surprised? The boys were following him. They were surprised that they could see the footprints, but they could not see the person whom these footprints belonged to. Okay, so till here, is everything clear? Brilliant scientist though he was, Griffin was rather a lawless person. See, this person was a brilliant scientist, but he was lawless. He broke the law. He was not a very law-abiding person. He had developed this power, and he wanted to keep it a secret. In the process, he had hurt many people. He had done many wrong things. That is why he had become a lawless person. His landlord disliked him and tried to eject him. He wanted to leave the house. He was not happy with him being there in his home, and so he wanted him to leave. In revenge, Griffin set fire to the house. But what did Griffin do? He's such a brilliant mind, such a brilliant scientist. But he was there, very annoyed, very angry. What did he do? He set the house on fire. To get away without being seen, he had to remove his clothes. There was only one way that he had of escape, and that was removing his clothes. Thus, it was that he became a homeless wanderer without clothes, without money, and quite invisible until he happened to step in some mud and left footprints as he walked. So he's left his home, he's moving from one place to another. He doesn't have clothes because only when he is not wearing clothes he is invisible. He does not have money. And yes, right now he does not know what to do, and he stepped in the mud and his footprints are showing. So people are aware of his presence. They can't see him, but they know that he is somewhere around. He escaped easily enough from the boys who followed his footprints in London. But his adventures were no way over. He had chosen a bad time of the year to wander about London without clothes. It was midwinter. The air was bitterly cold and he could not do without clothes. Instead of walking about the streets, he decided to slip into a big London store for warmth. What has he done? He is there, decided maybe the wrong time of the year to become invisible, right? So he is there invisible as long as he does not have clothes. When he wears the clothes, he will be visible again, right? So his shape would be visible, his face would not be visible, and so he would have to do things, to make himself appear presentable, right? So he's chosen the wrong time of the year. Why? Because it is winter. Winter, it is going to be very difficult for him to move around with cold, like without the clothes. And that too in the London winter, how cold it is over there. And it was midwinter and it was bitterly cold. And he could not do without clothes. Instead of walking about the streets, he decided to slip into a big London store for warmth. So he decided that instead of roaming around here and there on the streets, I just go and hide in a shop, in a big store. So he's gone over there where he'll get warmth also. And yes, he will not, of course, surprise people with his footprints all over the place. Okay. Yes, so here what have we read? It's about Griffin becoming invisible and the problems that he has faced and the surprise on the faces of the people, the boys there, when they see the footprints, but they don't see the person. What have we learned about Griffin? He is a brilliant scientist, but he has broken the law. He has done wrong things. And one bad thing leads to another. Now he's just running away from that place where he can find warmth and comfort. He's roaming around in the streets of London, that in midwinter in such cold weather without clothes. So it's a very difficult time for him. So let's see what he does to save himself and to protect himself.